Welcome back, everyone. My name is Jon Uhler. This is TECNTV.com, the leader in Internet TV. I am broadcasting live, as I do each Friday night here on the station, from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. TECNTV.com is the leader in Internet TV. We are led by our tremendous CEO and president, Ken McClinton, who actually comes on just after me on this program 5 nights a week on the Exceptional Conservative Network. We are picking up where we left off prior to the break. I encourage you to go to SurvivorSupport.net under the podcast tab to look at some of the previous programs that will give you context to be able to process some of the information, because we're looking at material now that can be controversial without the context. We're looking at the primary issue that underlies all relational difficulties and pretty much all psychological issues. Just shy of organic issues. That means dealing with the body, so inherited or brain trauma or something to do with the brain itself. You really can boil all problems down to this. So when in my counseling practice, when somebody contacts me and I sit down with them, I know two things. That they probably either have unfinished business from the past, which has to do with grief and loss that's unfinished. And it doesn't make them good, better, and different. It just means this is what they probably are dealing with. So we're going to look for what past issues are unresolved in terms of grief and loss, and what relationships do they have in their life that they shouldn't, or that the boundaries don't match the current relationship. They probably have people in their lives that are not good for them in a way that leaves them feeling like this. So if you feel that you are under a pile, you'll recognize this picture from last time. If you joined us, you probably have a bunch of knapsacks. Now, where do those knapsacks come from? We have talked about in the past that the goal of life is to own one knapsack, no more, no less. If you have a bunch of knapsacks, you're going to feel stressed. And where do the knapsacks come from? Again, the goal I'm looking for here, the goal is how many knapsacks? Correct. The goal is one knapsack, no more and no less. In our knapsack is our responsibility to do what is right, just, and fair. So a healthy relationship, a reasonable relationship, is one in which people own their responsibility, no more and no less. I'll bring my little picture up there. And again, SurvivorSupport.net under the podcast tabs, that will bring you up to where we are at, because we've looked at relationships that if you are with someone that is dumping and dumping and dumping, you are going downhill because they're violating their conscience and they're causing you to violate your intuition. And that's where we are picking up now. We looked at a picture, and I'll just kind of keep my picture here. We're going to talk about conscience again. This is a review from last time. There are two mechanisms in play that are designed to help maintain boundaries. And when we say help maintain boundaries, what are we talking about? We are talking about this. There we go. So it's two people doing what is right, just, and fair, and that maintains value and respect and appreciation and esteem. So when things get out of whack, when things get unbalanced, and usually it's little by little, so there are different weights and measures, as it were. We could label these different things, right? You've got different weights. Those can represent different things. Now, of course, in this picture, we have different concerns, but oftentimes when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with situations where people have not just been thoughtless, as far as they haven't been thinking, but they've actually, by degree, been intentional. Now, what intentional as far as targeting you? Not necessarily, but intentional in making sure things don't change. Things don't change in what way? One up, one down relationship. So they kind of like it this way. And we've talked about in the past, we'll show it one more time. If you have a relationship that looks like this. Now, I just flipped it. It doesn't matter which side. So the scales of justice show it the opposite way. So the person that feels the weight of it, again, these two pictures are as far as the right and left side. Don't worry about that, but just think in terms of as somebody offloads their responsibility, what happens? They place it on somebody else. So relationally, we can show it like this, that you have this person on the right would be the one up. So the person on the right in this picture is the one up. Why? They've offloaded their responsibility. They've dumped it, so their load gets lighter, and what happens? We have the dump or dump B, and that person is starting to die under the pile. And of course, to the extent that you allow that, you're going to have an unhealthy relationship. Okay, so the two mechanisms in play that God has designed to maintain boundaries are this: conscience and intuition. I'll get my picture out. There we go. So conscience and intuition are in play 100% of the time when it has to do with relationships. If you were crash landed on a tropical island by yourself, you wouldn't need either. So the book of Proverbs is all about helping us with conscience and intuition. When you have anxiety or depression or compulsions or any of the psychological issues, again, just shy of an organic issue, so I'm going to get that off the table. The vast majority of people are doing okay physically, right? If your hormones are out of balance, that's another physical issue, but oftentimes the ills of one will affect the other, ills of the other, body, soul, and spirit, mind, will, and emotions. So, but it inevitably comes back to this: all things being equal, look at the relationships in your life. And if you are stressed, if you are depressed, if you are anxious, if you're having panic attacks, if you are compulsive, then you have something out of whack as far as a relationship, and it's probably like that. So what's happened is this: somebody's violated their conscience or overriding their conscience. Conscience is like the radar system in an airplane, that it keeps us out of somebody else's restricted airspace. How does somebody feel they have the right to have restricted airspace? Because they say so, right? Meaning they don't have to apologize for it if they have authority. Now the question is this: who has authority over your life? God does, but God has given you dominion over your life. You're going to be called to give an account. I'll bring my picture back up, right? He's not going to take a lot of excuses. He's very loving, but we won't be able to say, well, I didn't fulfill my purpose in life because they wouldn't let me. Okay, unless you're held hostage, but then that becomes kind of a different kind of purpose. Okay, you need to fulfill your purpose. But there's plenty of people that are going to do what? They are going to offload their responsibility. And once you look like that, again, you feel like what? You feel, I'm just going to grab another, right? You feel like this. Now that's with a family, but you can have a family of very selfish people, right? Now our job is to help our kids not become selfish. But anyway, so anytime I confuse knapsacks and boulders, bad things are going to happen. So conscience is designed to keep me out of somebody's restricted airspace. That has to do with boundaries. The difference between a burglar and a guest is what? Permission. Okay, so conscience keeps you out of somebody else's restricted airspace, meaning boundaries. And if they decide, though, to turn their radar system off, what happens? Now they're going to cross a boundary. What's left now to stop it? Because what happens if they have a little bomb? I don't know. We're using the idea that they are now going to do damage, potentially. Okay, what's left to stop them? If they've turned their conscience off, then it better be your intuition. Your intuition is your ability to test reality that says, I know what I know. And so every selfish person will turn off these two things. They're going to turn their intuition off, but they're going to try to get you to turn off your intuition. So that is where we picked up, or where we pick up, where we left off and we pick up now, because there will be a lot of ways that we will excuse away somebody else's responsibility. Now, If I'm in a one-up, one-down relationship, we will call that an oppressive relationship. You will feel the weight of it. And how does God feel about oppressors? And how, in what ways can we oppress? We can oppress in different ways, big ways and small ways. How did God feel about having just weights and measures? Okay. Those are representative of value. If I'm ripping somebody off in terms of, I first devalue or disrespect someone, and then I begin to rip them off. So by degree, the behavior will match the extent to which I am devaluing someone. Okay, so that is how we oppress. We can oppress in one fell swoop, or death by 1,000 cuts, death by 1,000 chipping away of self-esteem. The term gaslighting, oftentimes it's not exactly used properly, because in the movie Gaslight, that gal didn't fight back. Now, I'm not recommending that, but the true gaslight, a gaslighter makes you feel crazy. It's not just somebody running their mouth. Go watch the very first version of the movie Gaslight. And it's a powerful thing, and you don't want to be around somebody that's gaslighting, but the true idea of gaslighting is you actually believe the person and you give so much credit to them that you start to feel crazy. The term, typically how it's used now, I would say this: you're dealing with a very selfish person that runs their mouth. Okay, so an oppressive person is one that dumps, taking their responsibility, placing on you. I'm sorry this picture is so small. Okay, but it's the same picture. So here's our picture right there. So we have a crossing of boundaries, and how is that going to happen? Let me see, I think I just advanced the slide. Let's try that again. Okay, so an oppressive relationship, here it is one that gives you what you don't deserve. We understand that, meaning they can dump, they can place responsibility on you, or they withhold from you what you do deserve. They stand on your emotional oxygen tube. Okay, that's how boundaries are crossed. I give you something that you don't deserve, or I take from you value, respect, dignity, appreciation. I can withhold that from you, and that's equally as oppressive. So one is more overt, the other is covert. Okay, now, an oppressive relationship is one that is emotionally irresponsible. So if you're in that kind of relationship, you are in an emotionally irresponsible relationship. You should not be in that kind of relationship. Okay, it's not godly. It's a toxic relationship. It is a fear-based relationship. So if you're in a relationship where you cannot speak the truth in love, the question is why? You are fearful. Perfect love casts out all fear. So you are not acting loving, and you are not, because you're trying to be nice. And remember, it is not nice to be godly. Try it again. It's not sorry. It's not godly to be nice. Nice is not in the Bible. You won't find it in Galatians 5. Okay, so it's nice to be nice, but nice presupposes other people are okay or happy with you. So you're just you're somebody waiting to be used if you believe that God wants you nice. Doesn't mean he doesn't want you mean. Love is patient, love is kind. Kind, by the way, is useful. Okay. It's a one-up, one-down relationship is a pearls before swine kind of relationship. It is an abuse-permitting relationship. You are allowing abuse to take place. And that's never godly. It's turning a blind eye to sinful attitudes and behavior kind of relationship. We are never called to do that. We're called to be salt and light, and we're called to spur one another on to love and good works, speak the truth in love. And we're also called to let our yes be yes, no be no, meaning we need to be straightforward with people. It is a non-relationship relationship. This is not a relationship. You have a relationship based upon proximity, not intimacy. And that's one thing if it's a Walmart greeter, but a Walmart greeter isn't going to dump on you. And it's a predatory relationship. These are all the same things. It's an emotionally irresponsible relationship. This is not a loving relationship. This is not godly. If I'm talking to a pastor right now and you tell people that this is what God wants from them, you are you need to go back and rethink things because you're out of line. This is not what God wants us to do. God wants us to make sure that we don't have pigs in our lives. This is a pig that's doing this. Now, it will grow. So once it becomes self-evident, okay, this happens over time. And so this presupposes to get to a point where I've got this kind of relationship, what it means is I've not been speaking the truth in love. I have not been doing iron sharpening iron, and I've not allowed myself to spur one another on to love and good works. So I have been disobedient while the other person has been growing their selfishness. It's an abusive relationship. It's a delusional relationship. The person on the right, the reason they keep in there and hanging in there is they think it's going to get better. But by the time you're dealing with somebody in the pig zone, Jesus says what? Do not cast your pearls before swine. It's a dysfunctional relationship. It is a perpetrator's dream relationship. And most importantly, it is not biblical. This is an unbiblical relationship. If you're in one of these, you need to not be in one of these, meaning you need to start implementing boundaries that if worse comes to worse, and you have this kind of person in your life, guess what? It is time to probably separate. Read Proverbs chapter 26, 27, and 28. Oh, gosh, hold on. I went ahead a little bit. Okay. Now, here are some of the dynamics. We looked at this last time. I wanted to review it again because this is really how I view my clients and me. Okay, so this is really what's going on underneath all depression, all anxiety, panic attacks, compulsive disorders, really anything that brings somebody into counseling, just shy of an organic issue. Okay, so they're in an oppressive relationship, meaning one up, one down, which is another way of saying an emotionally irresponsible relationship. They're giving, again, how do you do that? You give to someone what they don't deserve, or you withhold from someone what they do deserve. And we talked about, here's the description of the different kinds of people. On the left, the dumpor is going to be the selfish person. They're looking for a nice person. So we'll go down the left. These are all the descriptors of the dumpor. Who is the dumpor? It's the person, in this case, look on the right. So the person without the knapsacks, this is a description. They're selfish, they are hurtful, they are emotionally irresponsible, they are oppressive, they're a dumpor, they're a pig, they're a dog, and a fool. That is the person. In this picture, that's the person on the right that has no knapsacks, okay? That person does not come into counseling, by the way. They get mandated into treatment. I have a couple of treatment programs for men that are justice involved. I used to work in the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections for 11 years. Those were the men on the right, okay? The people on the left in this picture that have all the knapsacks, that is who calls me for counseling. So here's a description again. Oh gosh, sorry about that. We'll find our description again. We're gonna kind of go right. Let's find us. Sorry about that. We'll bring us right back to, I think, where are we? There we are. So again, unbiblical. There we are. Okay, so the dumpor, the person that has offloaded, that has no knapsack, is a selfish, hurtful, emotionally irresponsible, oppressive, dumper, pig, dog, fool kind of person. The person on the right that accepts somebody else's knapsack. Here's their issue. They are nice. Again, my goal in counseling is to make sure they're no longer nice. Now, it's not to create a Frankenstein's monster, but it's to help them not to be a doormat anymore. Okay, Jesus was not a doormat. Jesus said, love one another. He didn't say be nice to one. It's a big difference. Okay, moving along. The person that accepts somebody else's stuff is nice. They are a negatively impacted person. They're an emotional spittoon. A little graphic, but it gets the point across. They are an oppressed person. They're the dumpy. They are the enabler. They are the rescuer. And they are the chump. So every fool looks for what? That's right. They look for somebody, kind of like, wasn't it Barnum Bailey said that, I don't know, there's a fool in every crowd or something like that. Okay. Now, what is the primary problem that in counseling, what am I going to help work on? Well, if I'm dealing with justice-involved people, I'm going to work on one thing. If I'm dealing with the typical client that calls me because they're just trying to keep things together, so again, justice involved, meaning they're mandated to treatment, or somebody that's brought into counseling like this, right? The person that is resistant, they're usually resistant because they're being selfish, generally speaking. Okay, so what are we going to work on? We are going to work on issues of conscience and intuition. So the dump or the pig violates their conscience. So when I'm dealing with the men that I deal with that are justice involved, meaning been arrested, typically I have to focus on what? I'm going to focus on conscience. I have to bring their conscience back so their conscience can be their guide, but we also have to properly inform their conscience. For the rest of people, when we think of counseling, that's pretty much what we're looking at now. Those are people that have had their intuition violated, so we need to help them bring their intuition back. Now, what will be the focus of treatment? Well, in each of those kinds of populations, as it were, so if we're dealing with the selfish people or justice-involved people, we're going to focus on how they refused to abide by limits. Okay? We're going to help them own their stuff. As a matter of fact, the 12 steps. Now, in the 12 steps, you have people that haven't necessarily been involved in the justice system, but think about the 12 steps. When somebody finally hits bottom, it usually has been that they've been negatively impacting others. So steps 1 through 3 essentially say there is a God, you're not him. What is step 4? Step 4 says, I did a searching and fearless moral inventory. That is really Matthew chapter 5. That is when you're at the altar presenting your gift and you suddenly remember that you've been hurtful. How were you hurtful? You've crossed somebody's boundaries. So you were refusing to abide by limits, the limits that God says. He says, do not trespass, and you trespassed. He says, do not be hurtful, right? We're not to be hurtful of others. So don't trespass against someone. Don't transgress. Somebody who comes into counseling in the regular way, they typically are anxious because they don't want to speak truth. So our goal will be to help them speak truth. The primary motivation of the person who resists boundaries is what? Personal satisfaction. They are doing themselves. They're singing like Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. The Bible references that has to do with the lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life, and that usually has to do with money, sex, power, and control. That's what's motivating them. They need to humble themselves. They need to get rid of their ego. And we'll talk about that in a second. And then the primary motivation for the other people that are not speaking the truth is safety and stability and predictability. And here's probably the most important thing, the issue of connection. That's why they're not speaking the truth. They're for fear of what? For fear of the relationship eventually ending. But better go it alone than to be with people that are harming you, that are chipping away. And at the end of this chart, there we go. So the primary underlying issue really comes out of Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. It says this, Lord, search me and know my heart. Right? Freud called it the unconscious or subconscious, but we need God to help us. Help us what? If I find myself, if I'm in this kind of relationship, then the two bottom line issues in play are this. The person that has offloaded their responsibility, that is their ego at work. And the only answer to that is death to self. Okay, what do you do with ego? You can only do two things. Squish it like a bug, pop it like a zit. Okay, but the person on the right, what's the primary thing? It is fear. David says in Psalm 139, verse 23 and 24, Lord, search me and know my heart. Show me my anxious thoughts and my hurtful ways, and lead me in the way everlasting. The goal of counseling, the goal in order for us to be about the business that we should be, being a good steward and moving towards the goal of the upward calling in our journey to healing, is being able to speak the truth. And oftentimes that means I'm going to have to risk going down into the valley of the shadow of death. That has to do with the potential that the people that have been using me, that have been offloading, once I start finally speaking the truth, what's going to happen? They may decide to distance themselves, and that will bring about pain. And that's what we've been avoiding. We have to trust the Lord enough that He will get us through. And if it's just He and me, it'll be okay. We will continue looking at boundaries on the next edition of Journey to Healing.
You've been listening to Journey to Healing, sponsored by SurvivorSupport.net. We trust you've been helped by the information our host, Jon Uhler, has shared. To donate to this ministry, schedule a personal consultation with Jon, or to arrange a professional training for your church or organization with Jon, simply visit our website. On behalf of Survivor Support, we look forward to hearing from you and to have you join us next time on Journey to Healing.